We start with a very basic question. Now that the U.S. Supreme Court has ended a woman's right to obtain an abortion, is abortion now illegal in Arizona? Several abortion providers have suspended their services because, they say, the law is unclear. Joining us to provide some clarity on the law is Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell, the top prosecutor in one of the largest prosecutorial offices in the country. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let's start with that question. Is abortion now illegal in Arizona?
It certainly appears that some abortion is going to be illegal in terms of the providers providing it. It is complicated, as you know, and one of the things that makes it so complex is that there have been a number of statutes passed over the years. Some have been found to be unconstitutional. The one that was in effect at the time that Roe v. Wade came down was enjoined. And so figuring out what exactly is the law, because some of them somewhat contradict with themselves in terms of how far into the pregnancy, etc. So it's going to be a complex question for the courts.
So I've been told, well, I've been told, I have it right here. As you know, there was a 1973 permanent injunction placed on the more than century-old ban in Arizona. So what would it take to put that into effect?
If I understand that injunction correctly, it was issued in Pima County, and it enjoined the Pima County attorney as well as the attorney general. So one of the first questions is, does that enjoin the entire state, all of the prosecutors? But the best course of action, if they wanted to lift that injunction, would be to go to the court and ask for it to be lifted.
So who would do that?
I assume the attorney general would do that.
Could you do that?
I probably could if it was determined to affect us, yes.
So what is stopping anybody from doing that, given what the Supreme Court has just ruled?
Well, obviously that was just on Friday that the court ruled that way. And so I do expect to see litigation filed very shortly, probably on both sides, so that we can straighten out the state of the law in Arizona.
Because what I see is basically the governor has said a while ago, oh, the 15-week ban, the ban on abortions after 15 weeks that was passed by the legislature, that will be the law. The governor has no say on what the law is, correct?
Well,
he's not a lawyer. He's not a prosecutor. He's not you.
He signed off on the
He signed the bill, but as far as the legal enforcement of it,
that is the job of the courts.
I found that statement odd. Mark Brnovich said just on Friday, basically the 15-week ban is going to be the law at the end of September when state laws take effect 3 months after the end of session. Is that the way this is going to roll out then? The 15-week law is going to be the law?
Since the legislature has adjourned in 90 days, that law will take effect. What's complicating matters are the other statutes that are still on the books. So there's one statute, 133603, that basically outlaws all abortions in terms of the provider. It prevents the provider from doing it, except in the case of danger to the mother's life. So there's going to have to be a court that looks at that, or perhaps the legislature will come back into special session and decide which one they want to control. But that's going to have to be decided.
So here's what I'm wondering, and it's a political question since we are in an election season. This might be a pretty tough, a total ban, which is on the books, except in the cases of the mother's health, might be pretty tough to put into law in the middle of an election season when there are a lot of voters, a lot of women voters, who don't like that idea. Is that what's going on here?
You'd have to ask the legislature what their plans are in terms of if they're going to have a special session. They're going to have to look at whether they want to have it this year or after the election, when people have weighed in knowing about the Dobbs decision.
Has the governor communicated that that's the way he'd like this to play out?
I have not heard him call for a special session yet. Obviously, we're just on the heels of them adjourning from their regular session.
So what I hear you saying essentially is that right now abortion is as legal as it was before the Supreme Court ruled on Friday.
I don't think it's as legal as it was before they ruled. What I'm saying is I don't think it's clear which law is controlling between 133603, which is the older law that everybody is talking about, and the new law that is not yet in effect. which will go into effect in 90 days.
Well, what are you prosecuting? Which
I'm
law are you enforcing?
I'm not prosecuting anything right now. There is no case right in front of me. If a case is presented to me, then we're going to have to really look at the circumstances of that case and see what we feel can be legitimately argued as to the state of the law. But I do want to make something clear, because I've heard this a lot on television, is that the woman can be prosecuted. I heard somebody say, oh, we could charge first-degree murder. And I want to make it clear, this is a very emotional situation on both sides. Both sides feel very strongly. But what is clear is the legislature has expressed an intent to not have the woman prosecuted. Last year they passed a law regarding abortion, and in that bill they actually repealed the companion statute to 133603, and that was 133604. So for the listeners, 3603 is what is still on the books, and it contains provisions that the provider cannot provide abortion, but they repealed 3604, which concerned women. So there's a very clear expression of intent that it is not applicable to the women.
So here's another thing that puzzles me. So you, other prosecutors, the Attorney General, have had months to prepare for this ruling. Why is this suddenly confusing and a jumble to folks, and there is no one has outlined a path?
Well, first of all, leak notwithstanding, you had to look at which way the court was going to come down on the Mississippi law. As you saw, it was a 6-3 decision in terms of deciding the judgment, but Justice Roberts separated himself from the other 5 in the majority by saying, I would just have upheld the 15-week ban. So one of the questions is, were they going to simply say that there's a 15-week ban is acceptable, or were they going to completely overturn Roe v. Wade? And that is a very significant difference in terms of interpreting what we're going to apply here.
Right, but certainly you knew Roe v. Wade was overturning Roe v. Wade was a possibility.
Absolutely. But that does not tell us then which law is controlling here. And there, as you well know, there are statutes in the criminal section, there are statutes that apply to abortion in Title 36, which is more of a medical area.
So I want to get back to the 15-week ban. We discussed it when you were on the show back in late April, and you talked about the discretion you would use in those cases because they don't allow exceptions for rape or incest. Let's play that soundbite so folks can hear it.
While I will enforce the law, because it is not my role to say I'm not going to just blanket and not enforce the law, I think those situations perhaps are where prosecutorial discretion can be exercised.
Were you able to hear that?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So do you still stand by that with the 15-week ban?
Absolutely. As we talked about when I was on before, situations where people have gotten pregnant through rape or incest, those are not theoretical discussions to me. I'm, as a 30-year prosecutor, and as you know, 25 years of those prosecuting crimes against children and women, I've had a number of victims that have gotten pregnant through rape and incest. And I do think there is a difference between talking about looking at the specific circumstances of a specific case where it may be a victim of rape or incest, and talking about just refusing to follow the law wholesale. One is just not following your statutory responsibility. The other is prosecutorial discretion.
And would you follow that discretion, use that discretion, if a total ban were in place? No, forget 15 weeks, just abortion is just illegal. And that doesn't account for the exceptions.
I see. Yes. If there is a total ban, if it's decided that there is a total ban against providers providing abortion, we still have to look at each individual case. We still are going to look at, is there a reasonable likelihood of conviction? And certainly, I am not going to re-victimize people who have been victimized through rape and incest.
Do you support a total ban on abortion, which the Supreme Court now allows?
I would have to look at any sort of exceptions and how they're written. But, that goes back to the point that I made earlier, which is this is not about my personal beliefs. I don't think those should come to play in how I enforce the cases in the law. My job as a prosecutor is to enforce the law as determined by the courts and the legislature. And that is the oath that I took 60 days ago, and that is the oath I'm going to stand by. I am not going to stand up here and say, no, I'm not going to enforce the law. If it ever gets to the point where I can't enforce the law for moral reasons, I'll step down. I don't think that's the role of the prosecutor.
Okay. So I want to summarize and go back to where we started.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like abortion is still legal in Arizona. Other than this jumble of laws that need to be sorted through, there's nothing on the books that would change the way it's enforced.
Well, I think it is arguably illegal, but the problem is you have to figure out which statute controls. One statute says no providing abortion except danger to the mother's life. One statute talks about getting an abortion for gender selection purposes, etc.
Who's going to sort that out?
The courts.
Who's going to bring it to the courts?
I think the legislature is probably going to convene, and I think at some point somebody is going to file either an attempt for an injunction or try to raise the injunction, and I think that's what will spur it.
So this will play out over quite a period.
This is not going to get solved on Monday, but you might see some litigation start on Monday. But it is very complicated, and nobody's dodging this question. It is extremely complicated. I was watching some legal experts yesterday, and they pretty much gave the same answer. We just don't know, and that needs to be settled. What is clear is this. The Supreme Court has returned the right to the states to decide. So Arizona is going to, through its legislature, through its governor, decide what they want the law to be. They've done that, but some of those laws are inconsistent. The courts, in the meantime, are going to have to interpret which of those laws controls. And when the courts decide what the law is, and when the legislature expresses its intent, then yes, I think it is incumbent on the prosecutor to follow the law.
But that could take several months to play out.
It could.
Past the election.
It could.
All right. Maricopa County Attorney Rachel Mitchell, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.